Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City of Pompano Beach Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for Thursday, December 19th, 2024. Meredith, would you please call the roll?
Joe Circusi.
Here.
Penny Cutt.
Here.
Ray Lombomsky.
Here.
Ada Rogers.
Here.
Charlotte Burry.
Here.
Daniel Yaffe.
Here. Sounds like we have a quorum. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 21st meeting
So
made by
moved.
someone who is here?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks very much. Folks, I'm going to take a few minutes and explain to you what we're doing here tonight. I know some of you may be represented by counsel who might be familiar with our process and procedure. We are the Zoning Board of Appeals. We're 6 people, myself, 3 to my left, 2 to my right, who make up the board. We will listen to your appeal, whether it's a special exception, a variance, temporary permit, or other. We have criteria that you have to meet, the prerequisites you've gotten in your application package. And what we want to hear tonight is your explanation of why your property meets the requirements to be granted the relief that you require. In order to gain that, you need to have a supermajority approval, which is 5 out of 6 of us. All right, it's a simple majority of 4 to fails, so it's 5 out of 6. To my far right is Scott Reale, who's with the Development Services Department. He's our staff representative and will give staff reports and give us advice there. My far left is James Saunders, Assistant City Attorney, who gives the board legal advice, and Meredith Rollins, who actually is in charge of everything. So you know where the power is. When I call your case, I'm going to have you come up to that podium, ask you your name, address, and spell your last name, and if you've been sworn in. This is a quasi-judicial hearing. Everyone's who's going to speak is going to get sworn in, and I'll do that in a few minutes. You can present your case, offer any evidence, offer any witnesses, diagrams, anything you want. We have screens you can put it on, overheads. The public meeting, so I will at some point give the public an opportunity to speak first for and then against. The board may ask you questions at any time. Before we close, you'll have an opportunity for a closing comment, and then once the public hearing is closed, the board will, in front of you, discuss and usually make a motion and then discuss the case, and then you'll see the vote. You'll know right away what's happening. Everything here is we talk Gesundheit. We talk about being in the sunshine and being able to see everything. This is what we pride ourselves on. In addition to you folks here, we're on television. We are also on YouTube. If you ever want to watch us when you're not home or you're not here and you don't have access to cable TV in Pompano, we'd appreciate if you'd watch us, because any one of you turning on will probably double our internet count. So, and I'm hoping maybe 10 years we could start selling advertising. I'm just kidding about that. What I'm going to do right now is ask anyone who's going to speak or thinks they're going to speak to please stand up and raise their right hand. Meredith?
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Thank you. You may be seated. All right. In the first case is F, new business, 1 LN 661, a major temporary use by Ampkin Atlantic Square LLC. Okay, why don't you come up, whoever's coming up to the podium. Thank you. Before we, and just stand there for just 1 second, I just have a housekeeping issue I forgot to do, and that is I need a motion on item 5, the variance for 505 North Ocean LLC, 24-11000013. I'd like to a motion to move it to the January
16th.
January what?
16th.
January.
A motion to move it to January 16th.
It's so moved.
Thank you. I was looking for that.
Item number 5.
Right.
Item number 5.
All right.
So moved.
All those any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. If any one of you are here or watching us on the World Wide Web, and are looking for the discussion of the variance of 505 North Ocean LLC. It is not going to be heard tonight. It will be heard next month, January 16th at 6 p.m. And I understand no further advertising?
That's correct. It's postponed to a date certain.
Awesome. Okay, so we've taken care of that. Tell us who you are.
Hi, my name is Joanna Valdez. I am with Arcworks Incorporated, located in Pembroke Pines, Florida. We are an architecture firm representing Phil and Aaron Shipley. They are the tenants for the space at 2798 East Atlantic.
Okay. May I have the spelling of your last name?
Valdes.
And your address, or your business address is fine.
21113 Johnson Street, Suite 117, Pembroke Pines, Florida 33029.
And I always have to ask everybody, have you been sworn in?
Yes.
Thank you. Scott, give us the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, members of the board and everyone else who's here tonight. The applicant landowner is requesting a major temporary use permit from the provisions of Chapter 155, Article 4, which are the use standards, and Article 5, which are the development standards of the Pompano Beach Zoning Code, in order to construct a temporary deck over existing asphalt for outdoor dining at a restaurant without complying with the applicable use and development standards required by code. The subject property is located in the East CRA on the south side of East Atlantic Boulevard and west of 28th Avenue. The property is situated on the site of a former gas station, which is part of the larger Atlantic Square Plaza. The Flamingo Seafood Restaurant briefly operated at this location, but has since closed. The applicant plans to redevelop the vacant restaurant space and propose the addition of a approximately 2,800 square foot wooden deck to accommodate outdoor dining. A significant portion of the deck will be positioned beneath the existing canopy of the former gas station. While the applicant intends to pursue formal site plan approval through the Development Review Committee process, they are seeking permission to begin construction of the deck in the interim. To ensure the safety of patrons, existing bollards and newly installed planters will create a physical barrier between the outdoor dining area and vehicular traffic. The Community Redevelopment Agency has issued a memo of support of the proposal, and Development Services staff believes the addition of the deck will help activate and enhance this section of the Atlantic Boulevard corridor. Staff also agrees with the applicant's assertion that the deck will improve safety, as it will help discourage motorists from using the property as a cut-through and making illegal turns from Atlantic Boulevard onto Southeast 28th Avenue. There are 7 temporary use permit review standards. I've included these in the staff report. The applicant has addressed each of these, and should the board determine the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence sufficient to satisfy those review standards, staff requests the board include the following 2 conditions as part of the order. 1, obtain all necessary governmental permits and approvals, and 2, submit a site plan application prior to the expiration of this approval. That concludes staff's report.
Scott, are you, just want to clarify one thing. Do they have to have a site plan before we approve, before they can start building?
No, the request tonight is to allow the deck. That the recommended condition is if you approve it, prior to the expirations, which is 1 year, temporary use permits are valid for 1 year, they have to submit a site plan.
Oh, okay. I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Valdez, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone, for meeting with me tonight. Thank you, Scott, for the explanation. It pretty much, his explanation wrapped up everything. The existing site is a restaurant that had gone out of business, and the applicants are now following up on an application that they had that the owner had submitted last year that I believe the board had heard regarding the wood deck. We are reducing the size of the wood deck in order to create more of a mimic of the canopy above. The wood deck would be outdoor dining and seating for new customers and would reduce the cut-through of traffic throughout the site. We are also proposing some outdoor planters to the secondary. You can see on the east side the planters on the north portion to reduce the cut-through there. And then the interior renovation of the restaurant would also provide plumbing facilities for the new occupant load of the wood deck. There is existing parking to the rear and to the east side of the building to accommodate visitors to the site. And then we are also proposing an area indicated on the west side for any periodical food trucks or any outdoor events that might occur. The tenants would also apply for any permits for any special events in this case. The deck is temporary in its use for this application, and we will be pursuing a site plan approval or application to make it permanent in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. The board have any questions?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Didn't we issue a variance for this,
Uh,
or a temporary use?
Yes, it was a temporary use permit, 22-15000021. That was for the Flamingo Seafood. They never got off the ground. It went out of business before they did.
Did we grant that
You did
variance?
grant it, yes.
Granted that,
Yes.
and it was just never built?
Correct, correct.
And my recollection was one of their concerns was the length of lease from the property owner for the restaurant and because one of the questions was why were they building it as requesting a temporary use as opposed to a permanent use? And it was because they weren't sure how long they were going to be able to operate in the location because the future plans for development of the site.
That's correct. It's ripe for redevelopment, that entire block on the south side of Atlantic. I don't know the current situation, but
So you mentioned this being temporary and permanent in the future. What is the, intent and potential if the previous tenant had concerns with that?
Currently, the new tenants would like to develop the site as soon as possible to be able to generate more traffic to the area and to redevelop the site. We would be seeking a permanent nature in the future. We're just trying to get it up and running to be able to redevelop the site and make the site better.
So what is precluding you from, why do you need a temporary use as opposed to pursuing traditional authorization?
We will be seeking at the same time. We're just trying to get this up and running to be able to have the tenant's business operating.
Scott, is it quicker to get a major temporary use as opposed to a permanent building permit?
yes, well, they'll still have to go through permitting for the deck itself, but that would trigger a site plan, which requires several improvements to the site, landscaping and coming up to code to the extent possible. So that takes, a few months and so just to get this portion going now is why the applicant seeks a temporary use. And
So would the deck be reconfigured or redesigned in the future permanent use configuration?
If you identify yourself, please.
Yes, Rick Slazik, S-L-A-Z like zebra, Y-K 21113, Johnson Street, Pembroke Pines, Florida, 33029.
Sir, have you been sworn in?
I have.
Thanks, go ahead.
Very good. We were under the impression, that Scott, please fill in, but our understanding was that to begin this process, ultimately to become permanent, we had to start with temporary first. Is that correct?
well, you could submit for site plan now, but you probably wouldn't get your permits much quicker through a temporary use approval, and then you could go right to building permit for this deck versus submitting for DRC site plan review. That tends to take a little bit longer, and the understanding was that you guys want to get this going, and then during the year, it's the understanding and expectation is that you will submit for a site plan which would memorialize and make it a permanent fixture.
And it is the intent of the tenants for long-term occupation of the space.
And do the tenants have a long-term agreement with the property owner? Because my recollection is the previous tenants were basically, I guess, told that they would be not evicted, but terminated at any time, and that's why they had concerns with improving the property substantially.
Please speak into the mic, sir.
Name's Phil Shipley. My address is 2164 Northeast 27th Drive, Wilton Manors.
And, sir, Mr. Shipley, spell your last name?
Shipley, S-H-I-P for Philip, L-E-Y.
And have you been sworn in?
I have.
Carry on.
So we signed a lease for 5 years with an extension for another 5-year option on top. The realtor that we used that was representing the owner of the building said that there probably wouldn't be a development for at least 5 years, and he was thinking with how things are working with that owner at the moment with his other projects, it probably might be 10 years. They also leased out the Roberto's restaurant next door, and they're doing a major build on that. So when we came and met we just moved to Florida, my wife and I, and when we came and met the city, they were like, go for a temporary use because you'll probably be able to get it done quicker, and then apply for a full-time one. So yeah, we're here today to try and get the ball rolling and make that place look a lot prettier than it is right now.
Thank you.
No worries, thank you.
What are you proposing?
So we're going to be building a full restaurant. It's going to be breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's going to be a gourmet coffee place in the morning that turns into a real nice cocktail bar at nighttime. Brunches on the weekends. We're going to do a multi-concept, so we're going to have 3 different kitchens in there. And basically, the deck would allow us to, one, it will make it look way more inviting out there. We'll have the planters out there. It'll look beautiful. And it gives you all a place to come and sit and hang out and have a good time and all of that sort of stuff. So,
Thank
we'd
you.
love it if you could do it.
Any other questions?
No, I'm good.
Any questions over here? Yes, sir.
Yes. Parking, so it's showing 3, but you said behind, there's going to be parking?
So behind the building already, there's a parking lot that is in our lease as our
Okay.
parking.
That's in your lease?
Yes.
Because if you just said, because Umberto's used to have that, so you guys have spots they're giving you?
Yeah, so
How many total spots would you be available?
So they, in the lease and the picture that they gave us that we signed on in the lease, gave us all of the spots, which was weird to me being that Umberto's is next door. But I signed the lease because I thought that was great.
It's on there, so you're good for that? Okay.
All right. Don't see any other questions. This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support? First in support? Not in support. Not in support, okay. Meredith, any correspondence?
Just one letter of support from the CRA.
Okay, the CRA is supporting you on that. Folks, if you want to speak in opposition, if you want to come down here now, please. You guys can stay there. They're going to, if you come to the center podium. Right there. Come on, right here. I'm sorry, I asked for people who's speaking, and you raised your hand.
Yes, okay.
We'll need your name, either one of you to go first.
You want to speak first? Lori Cooper.
In the microphone, please.
Lori Cooper.
And have you
My
been-
address is 1031 Northeast 28th Avenue, Pompano Beach.
And would you spell your last name?
Cooper.
Have you been sworn in?
No.
Please, sorry. Is anybody else here that may want to speak that has not been sworn in? We only want to do this at least no more than 2 times a night. All right, raise your right hand.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, Ms. Cooper, now you're under oath.
I just wanted to ask a question as being a former gas station. Did they remove the gas tanks in the front of the building, and was there doing oil changes inside of the building, that they're doing a restaurant, and is this okay for food service, being a former gas station, whether there's soil samples or anything else?
The EPA requirements.
Okay, go ahead.
And soil testing.
Who wants to handle that one?
Yeah, right.
Penny, you know the answers to that, actually. But Scott, or you folks, you want to?
It was a restaurant previously before us, so we are under the understanding that everything has been done, and when we signed the lease, we got told that everything was clear.
Additionally, I believe
Please speak into the mic, sir.
our understanding also with a Phase 2 environmental was done because they do have monitoring wells on the site. So our understanding is that those issues were addressed.
Scott, in general, Who is responsible for licensing restaurants? And, I mean, it's a separate entity, it's Department of Health. I mean, they would have to do something, right?
I believe they, maybe I'll defer to Penny. She seems to, it's not really a zoning
I'm not
function.
sure about licensing of restaurants, but with respect to potential contamination from residual from the historical gas station that was there, the site is impervious, but any earthwork would trigger assessment and review of the current status of any groundwater or soil contamination. Any soils that were disturbed during construction or renovations of the site would have to be tested, and if they're not clean, they would have to be taken to an approved upland facility for cleanup. If there was a phase 2, and I'm not familiar with the specific site history, but if there was a phase 2, it would either be closed through a contamination assessment report and procedure, or it would be in a cleanup program, and the biggest concerns really would be through site disturbance or the potential for exposure to contaminated soils or contaminated groundwater and that migrating off-site.
I don't remember seeing any construction before the former restaurant removing the.
Again, that's really not our purview.
Right, no, but that's why I'm saying I wasn't sure if it was done or not, or.
Yeah, so the county and the state delegates their program for underground storage tanks to the county in Broward County, and they still have to adhere to the state chapters for tank removal, proper tank closure, removal of piping and everything else. So if there were remaining structures in the ground, they would have had to have been addressed. Otherwise, the state would be pursuing violations for that.
Okay.
So-
That was just a residential question that we were going to
It's
ask.
a good question.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, anyone else wish to speak in opposition? Hearing none. Any other questions on the board? Nope. Closing comments from you folks? Saldez? No?
Once we open, you've all got to come down and have a good time. Every day will be Christmas.
Thank you. The public hearing is closed. Board discussion, motion. What sayest thou?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
in P&Z case number 24-15-00008, I find that there is competent and substantial evidence in the record that all the requirements regarding this major temporary use permit and specials can be granted, subject to the 2 conditions requested by staff.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Meredith, please call the question.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
Penny Cutt,
Yes.
Joe Circusi,
Yes.
Ray Lumbumsky,
Yes.
Ada Rogers,
Yes.
Daniel Yaffe.
Yaffe. Yes, you're approved. Good luck. You know, the place has needed something for 30-something years that I've lived in the area.
Yeah.
So do something nice.
Yeah.
We were hoping the other place was going to do something. They lasted 6 months.
Just for you, we'll make it nicer. Happy holidays.
Yes, happy holidays to you, too.
Item number 2. Special exception family community residence, Glatt Holdings LLC, P&Z 24-17-00009.
My name is Jordan Cairns, Cairns, and I live at 121 Southwest 14th Court, Apartment B in Pompano Beach, 33060, and I have been sworn in.
Thank you. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just before we get into this, this application was initially presented to the ZBA at the October meeting, where it was denied. Last month, the board voted to rescind that denial and to rehear the application at the December meeting, and that brings us here today. For those board members who were present at the October meeting, I apologize for the repetition of my lengthy staff report. However, it contains information that I believe is important regarding community residences. So, with that being said, the applicant landowner is requesting special exception approval as required by Section 155-4202I3 of the City Zoning Code in order to utilize the subject property, which is zoned RS3, for a family community residence located less than 660 linear feet from an existing community residence, rather than separated by at least 660 linear feet as required by code. The property is located on the south side of Northeast 43rd Court, between Northeast 15th Avenue and Northeast 15th Terrace, in the Pompano Beach Highlands subdivision. The subject property has no open building permits, no business tax receipts, and no open code enforcement cases. The property contains 8 bedrooms and is over 4,000 square feet. The applicant is proposing a family community residence at this location. Ordinance 2018-60 codified Pompano Beach land use regulations to give prospective operators of community residences for people with disabilities and recovery communities clarity and certainty where such uses may locate as of right and via special exception. Community residences and recovery communities are subject to distance separation requirements from other similar uses so as to avoid clustering and altering the character of the neighborhood. A group home that does not comply with the minimum distance separation may be permitted in a single-family and two-family neighborhoods. However, they must seek zoning approval by the Zoning Board of Appeals by way of special exception in order to operate. Pompano Beach requires that applicants of such facilities must obtain special exception when they're located within 660 linear feet from an existing community residence housing 4 or more individuals or a recovery community as measured from the nearest property line of the proposed community residence to the nearest property line of the closest existing community residence or recovery community. The city's GIS tracking map for community residences and recovery communities identified a lawfully existing community residence located at 4341 Northeast 16th Street, which is approximately 560 linear feet from the subject property. The applicant has indicated they're in the process of obtaining FAR certification, that's Florida Association of Recovery Residences. Pompano Beach, Florida, Principles to Guide Zoning for Community Residences for People with Disabilities by Daniel Lauber in 2018 is included in the backup of this agenda item. Mr. Lauber is a respected planning and law expert on zoning for community residences since 1974 and has written model zoning guidelines for community residences on behalf of the American Planning Association and American Bar Association. This study was approved and accepted by Commission via Reso 2018-99, later revised and adopted 2018-178, and was the impetus for the framework for the aforementioned ordinance that codified community residence regulations in Pompano Beach. And following are a few of the pertinent findings in the study, particularly as they relate to the separation of similar facilities. The study says that when community residences are allowed as a permitted use, it is most reasonable to imposing a spacing distance between community residences that keeps them a block apart in terms of actual walking distance, generally about 660 feet, which is the typical American urban block face. It goes on to say that proposals to locate another community residence so close to an existing one warrant a case-by-case consideration. If the operator of a proposed community residence wishes to locate within the spacing distance, then the heightened scrutiny of a special use permit is warranted. Generally speaking, the existing social structure of a neighborhood can accommodate no more than 1 or 2 community residences in a single block face. The research suggests that there is a legitimate government interest to assure that community residences do not cluster. Although 2 community residences separated by at least several other houses on a block produce no negative impacts, there is credible evidence concern that community residences located more closely together on the same block, or more than 2 on a block, can generate adverse impacts. Interaction with neighbors without severe disabilities is an essential component to community residences, and one of the reasons planners and the courts long ago recognized the need for them to be located in residential neighborhoods. Their neighbors serve as role models, which helps foster the normalization and community integration as the core of community residences. As the courts have consistently concluded, community residences foster the same family values that even the most restrictive residential zoning districts promote. Family community residences comply with the purpose statements for each of the Pompano Beach zoning district that allows residential uses. And as part of their narrative and justification, the applicant has incorporated and referenced many aspects of this study. Included in the backup of this agenda item is a 2018 memo, also from Daniel Lauber, titled Tips for Evaluating Special Exception Applications for Community Residences and Recovery Communities Located Within the Spacing Distance. Additionally, on February 19th of this year, a supplemental report to the initial memo is included. And that updated memo encourages more flexibility when looking at spacing distance between two community residences. Specifically, decision makers should consider two types of measurements. One, the airline route, or as the crow flies, which is currently in our zoning code, but also a secondary, the public pedestrian right-of-way, which is the actual distance somebody would have to walk to get from one community residence to another. The definition of a family community residence states the intent is for residents to live in a family community residence on a long-term basis, typically a year or longer. Conversely, a transitional community residence is one that provides temporary living arrangement for 4 to 10 unrelated people with disabilities with a limit on length of tenancy less than a year that is measured in weeks or months as determined either in practice or by the rules, charter, or governing documents of the community residence. Community residence for people engaged in detoxification is an example of a very short-term transitional community residence. Again, the applicant is seeking a special exception for a family community residence. So the expectation and requirement involves long-term tenancy of its residents. Staff finds the proposed family community residence use appropriate and compatible with the neighborhood. If the code allowed distance separation between such facilities to be measured using actual streets and sidewalks rather than the way the crow flies, a special exception would not even be required in this case. The actual walking distance between the two properties is nearly 1/3 of a mile, or 1,760 feet. However, staff has concerns about the number of occupants proposed on the site. The ZBA can approve a family community residence for up to 10 residents, consistent with the adopted standards. And the applicant has previously stated they would like to house up to 17 residents at this property. The operator of the proposed community residence for more than 10 individuals with disabilities can seek zoning approval through a separate administrative reasonable accommodation process, and that's subject to a decision by the Development Services Director if they can prove therapeutic and or financial need for more than 10 residents and demonstrate that the home will emulate a biological family. Spacing and licensing certification requirements would still apply. The sheer number of residents under one roof coupled with the limited parking may negatively impact the immediate neighborhood and may negate the modality of a family community residence, which is intended to emulate a family in most every way. It's difficult to imagine how more than 10 residents can successfully emulate a biological family. The home may begin to take on the characteristics of a mini institution rather than a family or a residential use. Again, the applicant, you can approve up to 10 residents, and that's what we're here to discuss tonight. The zoning code requires that the community residents provide a minimum of 2 parking spaces plus 1 space located within 1,200 linear feet of off-site parking for each resident who maintains a motor vehicle on the premises. Unlike almost all other applications that are heard by the ZBA, a special exception for a community residence requires only a simple majority vote rather than a supermajority. So tonight you would need 4 out of 6 votes. Moreover, there are only 2 review standards to consider when a community resident seeks a special exception approval because of the separation requirement. And these standards are included in the report and the applicant has addressed each of them in their narrative. And I just want to read them into the record. A special exception for a community residence shall be approved by simple majority vote by the board only on finding that there is competent substantial evidence in the record that the special exception meets the following applicable standards. 1, when the proposed community residence arrangement is required to obtain a special exception because it would be located within 660 linear feet of an existing community residence, the applicant demonstrates that the proposed community residence will not interfere with the normalization and community integration of the residents of any existing community residence or recovery community, that the presence of other community residents or recovery communities will not interfere with the normalization and community integration of the residents of the proposed community residence. And 2, the second is the applicant demonstrates that the proposed community residence in combination with existing community residences and or recovery communities will not alter the residential character of the surrounding neighborhood by creating an institutional atmosphere or by creating or intensifying an institutional atmosphere or de facto social service district by concentrating or clustering community residences and or recovery communities on a block face or in a neighborhood. Again, there's only one facility within 660 feet, and it's 2 blocks away. Should the board determine that the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence sufficient to satisfy those 2 special exception review standards for a community residence, staff requests the board include the following 7 conditions as part of the order. 1, obtain all necessary governmental permits and approvals, including an approved community residence certificate and a business tax receipt for a rental property. 2, obtain and maintain FAR certification. 3, changes or alterations to the composition of the resident population and or lease agreements for a term of less than 1 year would require a new special exception approval. 4, approval is strictly limited to a family community residence, and changes to the operation of a transitional community residence would require a special exception approval. 5, provide an on-site and off-site parking plan to accommodate the number of occupants with vehicles. 6, the special exception approval is limited to a maximum of 10 residents. To establish a community residence for more than 10 occupants, the applicant shall submit a request for a reasonable accommodation in accordance with the procedures and applicable standards of Section 155-2432. And the 7th recommended staff condition, substantial conformance to all applicable zoning code standards. And that concludes my staff report.
Can you repeat the part? No. Thank you, Scott. I know we've actually heard parts of this several times, and we're looking forward to hearing it again. So please go ahead, and you, as you heard from Scott, there's just a couple of issues that we want to hear about that are important for this. So I leave it up to you.
I also stuck with my original narrative that I wrote. I thought about rewriting it, but they're really, all of the information and the facts that back up that we met those 2 standards are in this. So some of you will hear it again. Hopefully it's clear, and obviously I'll answer any questions that you guys might have afterward. So I'm here this evening.
Sorry, I couldn't hit it. I'm not sure how many people actually heard your original presentation. I don't believe I was there.
You weren't there. I was. She was.
You didn't hear it? You didn't hear it? Okay, so half of us.
Yeah.
So this is de novo. Start from the top.
Okay. I'm here this evening on behalf of the applicant, Lindsay Norwood, seeking an approval of special exception regarding the spacing distance between the proposed family community residence located at 1520 Northeast 43rd Court in Pompano Beach, and currently existing transitional community residence located at 4341 Northeast 16th Avenue, also in Pompano Beach. The City of Pompano Beach allows a family community residence as of right in District RS3 if it is at least 660 linear feet from the closest existing community residence, housing 4 or more individuals, as measured from the nearest property line of the proposed community residence to the nearest property line of the closest existing community residence. We have not been supplied with an exact as the crow flies measurement However, it was communicated in our meeting with the principal planner that the proposed family community residence and existing transitional community residence are 580 linear feet, or as the crow flies, from one another. Thus, we're required to apply for a special exception. It is important to note the difference of only 80 feet between the distance permitted as of right and the distance that requires a special exception regarding the previously mentioned properties. Since allowing the proposed family community residence to operate within the codified distance of 660 linear feet is what is being requested, I'm going to discuss two methods of measurement utilized by the City of Pompano Beach in determining that spacing. I will frequently refer to Daniel Lauber, who wrote Pompano Beach, Florida, Principles to Guide Zoning for Community Residences for People with Disabilities in June 2018, and the subsequent memorandum to that study in February 2024 for the City of Pompano Beach. Mr. Lauber writes about the use of two methods of measurement: as the crow flies, which is a straight line from one residence's property line to another's property line, and pedestrian right-of-way, which is the actual path a resident will walk from one residence to another. Let's first look at the method of measuring as the crow flies. Mr. Lauber in his memorandum states, even though the first method to determine permitted uses is more precise, it has some flaws in the real world and is impractical to use for determining whether a proposed use should be a permitted use. Instead, the study recommended employing the radius, or as the crow flies, approach for the initial determination of whether a proposed community residence or recovery community qualifies to be a permitted use, since it's practical, predictable, and feasible. Lauber continues, the as the crow flies radius around the closest existing community residence was intended to be used only as the first level of review to administratively determine whether a proposed community residence is a permitted use. During the first level of review, the City of Pompano Beach determined that although a permitted use per the city's zoning code, a special exception would be required to operate this family community residence at the proposed location. The second method of measurement is pedestrian right-of-way. This method calculates the path a resident would walk or drive in the real world and should be the method used when considering a special exception for distance. While Mr. Lauber states that utilizing the pedestrian right-of-way approach is impractical for determining spacing to be allowed as a permitted use in a Level 1 review, he confirms it definitely should be used when determining whether to grant a special exception when the city conducts a case-by-case review of an application to locate within the applicable spacing distance. Applying this method of measurement produces a 1,760-foot distance, more than double the required spacing distance. This brings me to Special Exception Review Standard 1A, which states the applicant demonstrates that the proposed community residence will not interfere with the normalization and community integration of the residents of any existing community residence, and that the presence of other community residences will not interfere with the normalization and community integration of the residents of the proposed community residence. Normalization and community integration are invaluable factors for success in recovery. Social connections and meaningful relationships made among neighbors allow for a boost in self-confidence, reduced isolation, and promote a sense of belonging. When individuals in recovery can fully participate in inclusive environments through living and working, they thrive in mainstream society. The 1,760-foot distance between them allows for interactions with a different set of able-bodied neighbors they can look to as role models. The proposed family community residence is surrounded on three sides by traditional residences on a different block and block face, with a block face between the residences and the front doors facing away from each other toward different areas of the community. In addition, there are 16 traditional residences, creating a barrier between these two properties. Further supporting the lack of interaction between residents of each community is that the two locations are not within sight of each other, and the main throughway in this neighborhood, 15th Avenue, provides a path for residents of the proposed residence to exit or enter the neighborhood, travel to work, grocery shop, or use public transportation without walking in front of the existing residence. In the unlikely event the residents would cross paths, it would not be obvious that the proposed family community residence is such. as there will not be any identifying characteristics announcing its presence or purpose. Therefore, if the residents of either community don't know the other community residents exist, then the chances of interacting primarily with the occupants of the other community residents are close to nil. This sentiment is supported by Lauber in his memorandum. The last factor to consider is the difference between the proposed and existing residences. The proposed residence is a family community residence and defined as a community residence that provides a relatively permanent living arrangement for people with disabilities where in practice and under its rules, charter, or other governing document does not limit how long a resident may live there. The intent is for residents to live in a family community residence on a long-term basis, typically a year or longer. The existing residence is a transitional community residence and defined as a community residence that provides a temporary living arrangement for 4 to 10 unrelated people with disabilities with a limit on length of tenancy less than a year that is measured in weeks or months as determined either in practice or by the rules, charter, or other governing document of the community residence. Both definitions can be found in Article 4, Part 2 of the City of Pompano Beach zoning codes. Residents of the existing transitional community residence stay less than 1 year, which lowers the chance of interacting with residents of the proposed community even further. The benefit of having a family community residence in the City of Pompano Beach is that the longer a resident stays, the more they integrate into the community by interacting with neighbors, forming relationships with them, and developing connections to the city and neighborhood. A resident's contribution to the neighborhood and the greater city will have a lasting impact on not only the present but the future. Special Exception Review Standard 1B states the applicant demonstrates that the proposed community residence, in combination with any existing community residences, will not alter the residential character of the surrounding neighborhood by creating an institutional atmosphere or by creating or intensifying an institutional atmosphere or de facto social service district, by concentrating or clustering community residences on a block face or in a neighborhood. I'd like to first refer to Lauber's comment in his Principles to Guide Zoning for Community Residences for People with Disabilities. It is written, the impacts of community residences have been studied more than those of any other small land use. Over 50 statistically valid studies have found that licensed community residences, not clustered on a block face, do not generate adverse impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. They do not affect property values, nor the ability to sell even the houses adjacent to them. They do not affect neighborhood safety, nor neighborhood character, as long as they are licensed and not clustered on a block face. They do not create excessive demand on public utilities, sewer systems, water supply, street capacity, or parking. They do not produce any more noise than a conventional family of the same size. All told, licensed, unclustered group homes, recovery communities, and small halfway houses have consistently been found to be as good a neighbor as biological families. He goes on to state the evidence is so overwhelming that few studies have been conducted in recent years since the issue is well settled. Community residences that are licensed and not clustered on a block face do not generate adverse impacts on the surrounding community. The city's concern in granting a special exception is the potential adverse impacts the location of the proposed community residence could have on the neighborhood. Since the proposed and existing community residences are not on the same block or block face, and there are no other community residences within 660-foot spacing distance, it is impossible for these residences to create a cluster or concentration on a block face or in the neighborhood. Additionally, the proposed community residence provides a structure that emulates a biological family. Residents will be responsible for maintaining the cleanliness of the inside and outside of the home. They will be responsible to work and pay rent, as well as participate in activities that enhance their recovery and overall well-being. Logically speaking, residents of both communities would need to interact solely with one another and with the exclusion of their able-bodied neighbors. The assumption here is that they know the other community residence exists. Considering the houses are owned by two separate individuals, have front doors facing opposite directions, and that it is unnecessary to travel past either residence to enter and exit the neighborhood, it is highly unlikely that they will be aware of each other's existence, let alone interact solely with one another. Lack of interaction with the existing community residents will not impede normalization and community integration for those residents. In Mr. Lauber's February 2024 memorandum, he provides the following example. A community residence is proposed a block away from an existing community residence serving the same population, well within the spacing distance allowed. They are separated by 3 streets and more than half a dozen houses. The residences are not visible to each other and are owned by different housing providers. The pedestrian right-of-way distance is almost 660 feet. Lauber's analysis found that the lack of visibility to each other reduces the chance that residents will even know the other exists. Residents of either community would need to cross 3 streets and more than a physical block to interact with one another. He continues, it is highly likely that the presence of the proposed recovery residents would not interfere with normalization or community, nor would it discourage the use of non-disabled neighbors as role models. The conclusion Lauber stated is given the actual ground distance between the 2 sites, which are under different ownerships, and their juxtaposition so that they aren't visible to each other, it's likely the residents of each won't know that the other one even exists. Consequently, it's likely that neither sober home would hinder normalization and community integration at the other one. It's likely that the special exception should be granted. The residences in question this evening are separated by an entire block face, 2.5 blocks, and at least a dozen other houses. They, like the residences in the example, are not visible to each other and are owned by different housing providers. The pedestrian right-of-way distance is 1,760 feet, more than double the required spacing distance in Pompano, as well as the distance given in the example. Lastly, we agree with Mr. Lauber when he stated, it is vital to stress that the decision on a special exception must be based on a record of factual evidence and not on neighborhood opposition rooted in unfounded myths and misconceptions about people with disabilities. As explained earlier in Lauber's report, restrictive covenants cannot exclude a community residence for people with disabilities, and such restrictions are, of course, irrelevant when evaluating an application for the special exception. He continues in his original study, as the Fair Housing Act requires, these spacing distances were never intended to be inflexible. The zoning amendments were written, as the study recommended, and the Fair Housing Act requires, to allow a proposed community residence to locate within this permitted use spacing distance when 2 narrowly crafted standards are met. Lauber further clarified in his memorandum that these spacing distances have never been intended to be rigid, and exceptions have always been expected to be granted on a case-by-case basis when the narrowly crafted specific standards are met. We believe the evidence and facts provided this evening are sufficient to meet the permitted use spacing distance standards, and thus a special exception should be granted. Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter.
Thank you very much. Does the board have any questions of the applicant at this time? Any? Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I thought you looked at me.
No, I did. I have some questions. Hi, again. Several questions, and they're a little scattered, so I apologize for that. I know that initially and I think we talked about this a little bit last time you were in front of us. Initially, you're looking at having 10 residents, but your goal is to have 17 in the home?
That was a possibility. We understand if 10's the max, 10's the max, and we're okay with that.
Do you have a business plan or financial plan that evaluates how many you need to operate sufficiently?
I read this on her behalf, so she's actually the applicant and the business owner.
My name is Lindsay Norwood, Norwood. I've been sworn in. My address is 815 Southwest 17th Street, Fort Lauderdale.
Go ahead.
I don't have, yes, we have all of that in place. I don't have that in front of me because that's not why we're here. But I wasn't prepared to speak on that. I didn't bring my original letter that I wrote the first time we were here, but I think that I can answer any questions that have to do with the distancing and the special exception, so.
Well, I'd like to understand, we're considering a special exception. I understand it's related to the distancing, but I also would like to understand and address the special exception considerations. There's certain things we need to consider when we vote to approve a special exception, and I'm trying to understand what the maximum number of, or the minimum number of residents it takes for you to be financially stable in this location.
I mean, we're trying to get 10. If we can get 10, if we can get the by right 10 residents, then we want the property.
So where did this 17 come from?
I mean, I'm not sure why it was put in the original report. That is the goal at some point, to fill that house, because there is plenty of space for it and follows all the FAR regulations and everything that we've looked into. But that wouldn't be the start.
I'm going to jump in here for just a second. What is your position with this organization?
I'm the owner.
Okay. Because you said before you didn't understand why a report was done, why a number 17 was put in there. Wouldn't that be a number that you would know?
No, yes, I don't know why that was put in the original report, as in having applied for a special exception, which has nothing to do with the number of residents in the house. It has to do with the fact that the property line is within 660-foot buffer.
We understand that, but the question was, I guess my question was, and Penny's question was, you're the owner. Answer her question. If you weren't the owner, I wouldn't expect you to know it. I expect you to know the answer.
I do know the answer, and I answered that. 10.
What is the minimum number of residents that are necessary for you to be financially stable in this operation? How many residents do you need to be able to operate here? Is it 6? Is it 8? Is it 17?
We could operate with 10.
Are you able to operate with 6?
No,
Are you able to operate with 7?
I don't think so. Not unless we make rent something that residents coming out of treatment could afford.
How do you get your residents? How are they referred to you?
Through treatment facilities, or PHPs is what we call them. Yeah,
I'm sorry, what's a PHB?
Partial hospitalization. So there's different levels of care when you go through treatment. The first one is detoxification. They would not be coming to us straight from detoxification. They'd be coming to us from treatment, which typically is at least 30 days of intensive inpatient care.
So are there any certifications required for you to operate this type of facility?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have those in place?
So, all right, FAR is not actually required. It's highly suggested, and we are in the process of obtaining the FAR certification. Having multiple hearings has kind of like pushed back that process for the specific residents, but we're in the middle of that, and I'm in contact with them. So we will be obtaining the FAR certification.
When do you anticipate having that?
Once we know that we have the go-ahead to utilize the property. It's not
Where are
in
you in the
use.
process?
It's not in use now. So once we know that that's the case, then they come out and do the site inspection.
So would you would have that certification prior to operating?
What their process is now is they give like a provisional certification. There's a lot of paperwork that they go through and check, and they give the provisional certification and come and do the site inspection to give that final certification, which is valid for a year. And then yearly they will contact Lindsay and then schedule an on-site inspection. They go through all of the paperwork and all of that stuff to ensure that what we laid out to them as, hey, this is how we're going to operate, is continuing to happen.
Scott, a question for you. Looking at Google Earth, it appears that these were originally two separate residences that maybe were combined through unity of title or something in the past?
I tried looking at the old building permits. Obviously, there was a massive addition. I didn't see anything about two separate.
Well, if you look, I've got it up on my screen right now, it appears like two completely different roof lines and two completely different roofs in this image. I realize from the street view, it looks like one uniform property. You know, I don't know if, are they two separate buildings? It looks like they don't have a shared wall.
My understanding is that it was a single-family dwelling, and it just got a really big addition. I couldn't find anything that suggests it was ever on two lots or two separate properties.
So on the addition, I believe the last time we met, you mentioned that they had a variance for the setback, possibly? Or the setback on the, I'm guessing the west side here, I'm not on, the setback on the, oh, I lost it. Yeah, the west side looks like it's really close to the property line. Was that, did they need a variance for that?
I didn't find any evidence of a variance for that. I believe they meet the setback requirements based on the survey, and if they don't, they may have gotten some sort of administrative relief at the time.
But that administrative relief would have been, assuming that this was a single-family residence for a traditional.
Correct, yes.
Related family.
Yeah, this was up until now, the proposal was always,
Yeah.
single-family dwelling,
Yeah,
yes.
so I'm curious to know if that, because having a facility with 10 to 17 people in it, that close to an adjacent single-family home, does give me a little bit of concern as well. If you look here, it's, you know, almost on the property line.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the survey here. The survey that was provided shows 10 feet on southwest. And the east side, this suggests 5 feet, 5.4
Yeah, I
feet.
think it'd be on the northwest corner of the building is where it looks extremely close.
RS3, yeah, I'm not sure if that 5.4 is just the sidewalk or to the property line. It's not.
I mean, I understand that the, you know, property appraiser's imagery is
Yeah, it could
often
be,
inaccurate,
yeah.
but that looks extremely close to the adjacent property line, and that brings me pause.
Let's see here. So the interior side setback requirement is 7 feet. It looks like it is 7 feet according to that survey. Again, I know the property appraiser can look a little.
Right, yeah, no,
like
I
it's skewed.
completely understand that, I work with.
But if this survey that was provided is updated, if it isn't 7 feet, it's very close to 7 feet on the northwest side. Because it looks like 5.4 feet is just the sidewalk, or the concrete walkway. And then it looks like there's a little bit extra.
And Scott, another question for you, then what is the number of residents that can legally live in a home on this property?
Well, there's Florida Building Code, and they determine that, but based on the number of bedrooms and the square footage and all that, of the bedroom size, essentially, it gets vetted by building and fire through an additional review subsequent to the community residence and recovery community certificate, but 10 residents would be allowed.
I'm just curious because
Based on
the
the
Lauber
size.
report quotes the number of residents cannot exceed the number permissible under the occupancy provisions of Pompano Beach's building code that apply to all residents. So I'm just curious, is that number 10? Is it 20? Is it 17?
I would have to defer to building, but I believe that it meets it's a 4,000 square foot house, so it has a number of bedrooms, so I believe it can handle 10 residents based on but I would defer to building.
So a typical, and I understand that the Lauber report references the 10 number, but a typical single-family residence doesn't usually have 10 people living in it, let alone 10 unrelated people. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around how 10 unrelated people in a residence in a single-family community neighborhood, obviously close to another similar type facility, will not interfere with the normalization and community integration of the residents. And I know we've been seeing more and more of these types of special exceptions coming before us. And I don't know that we've seen one, or at least not in a while, for such a high number of people. So I guess a question for the applicant is really, can you briefly explain to me how a facility like this with 10 people is normal in a single-family residential area? I mean, I would be very concerned if I had someone, whether they were related or unrelated, with 10 people living next door to me in Pompano Beach.
So I can only speak to my own experience. I've lived, and it's not, I don't like to use the word facility because it makes it sound like treatment, and that's not what it is. But it's a home. A lot of us, and I'm included in this, we go into treatment, we get our lives together. That's the very, very, very short version of our stories. And we build our own families together with one another. Many of us have lost our families, some of us haven't. But we come together, we live together, we learn how to start to handle life together. It is very much a community home. It's very much a family unit. And if anyone ever is accepted into that community and they don't adapt to that, they either weed themselves out or they're asked to leave. This kind of place that I want to open up is the kind of place that I've experienced, that my loved ones have experienced, and it's changed my life. And I can only speak to my experience. I understand that it's hard to know unless you have the background that I have, but I emulate that, or I will try to emulate that as much as possible, because that's what
How many people were in the community residence that you lived in?
Mine specifically, there was a total of 3 houses, 6 women in mine. The one I lived in, 8 in another one in our community, and then 9 in the third house. And people in the neighborhood didn't even know we were a sober living home.
So, I think there's a big difference between a home with 6 people in it and a home with 10 to 17 in it. And I believe we discussed parking arrangements as well last time, but I'd like to bring up parking arrangements again, because presumably all of these people re-entering into society and trying to integrate and normalize again would have a goal of obtaining vehicular transportation. Mm-hmm. And so I would think that sufficient parking should be available for adults who are trying to reintegrate into society and more than likely have a goal of getting a vehicle.
For sure. I mean, that is the case. Most time when people will come to us, they won't have a vehicle. It does take time to obtain a vehicle for those that have lost it. There is a total of 8. Is it 8 parking spots? The front of the house is just a driveway, basically. There's a total of 8 parking places there. And then our plan is also to, you know, base that factor off of who we accept as well, you know, in consideration with who already has a vehicle. So when we have, you know, people come, residents come apply to stay with us, that would be something that we would consider as well.
So you would not allow certain people if they had a car?
Well, just depending on, it would just be a consideration. We also have, it's not official, but we also have a partner who's in the same business as us, I guess you would say, who may provide additional parking for us, but I wasn't gonna bring that up because it's not 100% in stone.
So if you have 10 to 17 residents here, and you have, so how many residents, because there's, how many bedrooms again?
8.
8 bedrooms, so you would have, I mean, in my experience from these types of residences that are presented to us, we have had numerous applicants explain the benefit of having multiple residents per bedroom, psychologically, for recovery, for various reasons that I'm by far no expert in. So with 8 bedrooms, there appears to be a medical benefit to having multiple residents per room.
Therapeutic.
So if you're starting, therapeutic, thank you. So if you're starting with, you know, 10, and again, the goal is more, and we haven't necessarily seen, not that we need to see your financial plan, I'm just really trying to wrap my head around the real goal of this project and what's gonna make it successful, and the implications on the neighborhood and the community. And so when I hear, you know, 10 to 17 residents, there's 8 parking spaces, you know, most single-family homes don't have 8 cars out front. You know, that's a little out of the norm. What happened to me? You happen to be a car fanatic. Excuse me.
I was just gonna say that.
So the special
In that neighborhood,
exception.
there's actually many cars at many houses. That's just a side note, but I understand your concern, and I'm sorry if I wasn't prepared for that. I honestly kind of lost faith in the system a little bit the first time I came in front of the board. So, yeah, that's all.
I just want to speak specifically to what you're referencing as far as vehicles. And obviously, there's no way to guarantee where I can say, nope, nobody's going to have a car, or yes, everybody's going to have a car. Again, like Lindsay said, like I can base it on my experience. I did run a recovery residence as the director for 7 years, and we had 6 houses. We had 31 women. And we had to go through the city and send in the measurements of the parking spot, or send in the parking spots, the measurements of the bedrooms, and all of those items that you guys requested. And we never went over the amount of parking spaces that were allowed.
I'm going to stop this for just a minute, and let's be sure we're back on target. Counselor, I want to focus again on what the relevant issues are here.
And real quick, I'm looking at the special exception review standards for community residences, and I'm trying to
No,
understand.
and I want to be sure
Yeah.
we're all looking at that, Penny.
Okay.
Okay. Did you have any more questions?
Yeah, but I'm fine with getting Counselor to chime in the interim.
Yeah, I just want to be sure help us. I know we have, is this a distance only? What are we looking at tonight and voting on? I want to be sure we're laser focused.
Yeah, distance is a trigger. It is not the sole purpose of your review. The Lauber report, this has become
I know, that's one.
So because of that situation and some of the more clarification that we've gotten in the last year, it has opened sort of Pandora's box as it relates to this whole community residence process. There was an application, and I think Scott mentioned this in his report. There's an application process. Much of the discussion happens in that application process, where questions related to parking, spacing of bedrooms, all those kind of particulars are requested. Now, I'm not sure between the application and tonight whether or not, and Scott, you can chime in, if those items were provided to the board. My guess is, based upon the questions, maybe not. Because again, all of this dovetails into the normalization and integration of the particular proposed community residence and its interaction with a possible existing. So many of these questions are part of that process. I don't think it's discriminatory to ask those questions, which are part of the application process. Your review will come down to whether or not all of those factors contribute to the normalization and integration of those individuals into a residential neighborhood.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. I have asked in the past, and I would like to request again that staff provide an additional legal opinion going into some additional detail, because we're seeing more and more of these cases that are within the distance that triggers a zoning board vote requirement for them to be authorized. And I think there's a lot of conflicts between the existing Lauber reports, or conflicts, inconsistencies, or questions between the Lauber report and the city zoning code. And I think that's what I'm struggling with both Lauber reports open here and the city zoning code here, and Scott's staff report as well. I think we're just struggling with why are we seeing this frequency. And I think that we've still got a lot of questions. You know, on the surface, we understand the Lauber report and the guidance that it provides, but when you cross-reference that with the city code, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. And there's an interesting coincidence with us seeing more and more of these. So I think I respectfully request staff provide us with an additional legal opinion that compares and contrasts the guidance that we've gotten from the Lauber report with the regulations in the city code, so that we can better understand, and maybe once we have that documented, even would warrant a special meeting to, you know, go into detail once we've had a chance to review the additional guidance with the legal counsel that provides that. I'm assuming another independent law firm that has some specialization in this. But I'm just really struggling with how to apply the code, how to apply the Lauber report, and being convinced that it will not, that it meets the special exception review standards, that the proposed community residence will not interfere with the normalization and community integration of the residents of any existing community residence or recovery community, and the presence of other community residences or communities will not interfere with the normalization and integration of the residents of the proposed. And in combination with the existing community residence, recovery communities will not alter the residential character of the surrounding neighborhood by creating an institutional atmosphere or creating and intensifying an institutional atmosphere de facto social service district by concentrating or clustering. And so I understand the Lauber guidance. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what we're seeing in our community here.
As far as the, between myself and the department being able to obtain some sort of legal guidance dealing with the Lauber report for a variety of reasons, and what our code currently stands, there is no problem in doing that. I'll accept that direction from the chair and the board.
Please.
And we will, I don't know how long that's going to take, so I want to make sure you understand that. we will do that. Aside from that direction, this board still needs to grapple with the code as it currently exists, and the questions that have been posed and the information that has been given to you from this applicant. So that's still within the realm to ferret out tonight. The only thing I would ask the board to do is, through the chair to the applicant, I don't think it's on the record yet, the young lady's connection to the applicant. I'm not sure if she is one of the partners or, just for the record purposes, because you did introduce yourself. We have the owner, but not sure what your relationship is. And outside of that, I'll turn it back up to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any additional questions?
Well, you can go for now. Go ahead, and I'll chime in.
No, first of all, would like to ask what your relationship is.
So I'm here as a certified recovery residence administrator. So I am certified through the Florida Certification Board. It's a course that I have to take and a certificate that I have to maintain. I have to obtain 10 CEUs throughout the year to maintain that certification. And so in maintaining that, I'm able to offer assistance to individuals that are opening recovery residences that maybe have some change requests by FAR, because I have that knowledge and the understanding, and as I mentioned before, the personal work experience.
And what is your role within this organization?
I'm just here as a certified recovery residence administrator.
You're not an
I'm
employee or
employed by them, no.
Mr. Chair, if I may, you're a consultant to the operator?
Yes.
Is there a person with your certification that will be residing in this community residence?
Per FAR, there isn't anybody that is required. Each residence is required to have a certified recovery residence administrator, but they do not have to reside in the home. And so Lindsay is in the process of obtaining her certification. So in the meantime, I'm able to step in and fill that role for her until she obtains it. But per their requirements, they don't have to live in the home, so no, there won't.
And what is the role per the requirements? What's your interaction, frequency, obligations?
It varies residence to residence. FAR does give some leeway as far as that's concerned. It is ensuring, though, for the most part, it's ensuring that FAR's policies and procedures are being followed, as well as the policies and procedures that the residence itself takes on. Sometimes, FAR has a standard, and residences go above and beyond that, for their own structure and what they would like their community to look like. And so it's ensuring that all of those items are taken care of, that proper documentation for drug testing and things like that, as well as sometimes they're present for the yearly FAR inspection, and generally work one-on-one with the owners or the house manager, just depending how it's set up.
So do the FAR standards recommend roommates in the bedrooms?
Their standards don't specifically recommend that. It's more like you and Lindsay were talking about before, like a therapeutic use, more based on the studies that have been done that, due to isolation and, different things that happen when people are in active addiction, to not set themselves up for that again. It is beneficial to have a roommate and have somebody, to talk to and lean on that's going through what you're going through. But they don't have any specific standards saying that there has to be two per person. It's more of a best practice.
Yeah, I'm still struggling a bit to understand how this is financially feasible with one person per bedroom or a total of 10 people in the house, and whether that's a viable operation. And I just envision this growing, and again, with 10 unrelated people in a house, up to 17 unrelated people in a house, I can't wrap my head around how that doesn't change the microcosm in that immediate vicinity for the local residents.
Yeah. If I can jump in for a minute. A lot of this conversation seems to be around, 10, and I'm going to paraphrase, I may be wrong, but it seems like 10 is okay, 17 is not.
Well, I don't know that 10 is okay.
Well,
That's
I understand, but,
what I'm struggling with.
right, but that seems to be at least a big jump, number of bedrooms, whatever. Scott, so specifically, what are, right now, this application would entitle them to how many?
10, and only 10.
Only 10.
And if it gets the approval, then the applicant may petition the Development Services Director through a reasonable accommodation for more. But there are still review standards for that, and it could easily be denied. There's absolutely no guarantees if you get 10 that you're going to get
And my
more.
recollection is that
excuse me,
goes to
Penny?
Development Services, not back to ZBA.
Okay,
Correct.
right, and I was going to ask, so it doesn't come back here, then can we put a condition that our approval is limited to 10 people? As a condition?
Well, all you could approve is 10. I don't know that you can restrict it in the future because
Just asking.
Yeah, your approval is your approval. The max is the max. There's
Well,
no,
we very often condition approvals on a litany of different items.
right, but
And I'm questioning whether or not this can be a condition of our approval. It's always, 3 recommendations to staff, 7 recommendations to staff. Can this be one of those?
I do not believe so because your max is 10.
Okay. So all we're doing is limited to 10. If they want to have more than that, it's out of our hands. They go to who do they go to? Development Services? Yeah. And
Director of Development Services. yeah.
and they've got to deal with that. We have no control.
But my question is, with 10 residents in a single-family home, 10 unrelated residents in a single-family home, does that alter the character of the neighborhood in the vicinity, especially considering another similar
Okay.
recovery residence within the distance limitation?
How many does that, Scott, how many people does that facility have?
I apologize, I do not have that information. I know it's a transitional community residence, and that's sort of a different modality that's more short-term, and this...
And in everything Lauber wrote, and I read a lot of it, did he write anything about the number of people, did he use the number of people in any of his references?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, up to 10, and sometimes even up to 12 is what Lauber
Lauber
feels comfortable.
states, "The burden will be on the applicant to show the therapeutic or financial need for more than 10 residents and to convincingly demonstrate how the residents will emulate a biological family." So he says the proposed zoning amendments will cap community residents at 10 occupants and establish a structured administrative reasonable accommodation procedure to lift the cap beyond 10.
So that's Development Services that does that later on.
Yes.
So we're simply approving or not approving 10. I just want to
Right.
be sure that we're all looking at the same thing here.
And so the question again, to address the special exception review standards for community residences is, does 10 people in a family community residence within 660 feet of a transitional community residence alter the neighborhood? Is that lead towards clustering? Does that devalue single-family homes between the two?
And that's why I asked you
does
about
that
Lauber
give-
saying anything.
Yeah, I
about
mean,
that.
he speaks to it, and that's why they have to come to us to consider it.
All right. Penny, what's your concern here?
Changing the community, altering the character of the neighborhood, and the potential for that many people to bump into each other. That's what Lauber goes into. What is the potential for these people to encounter each other and fall back into bad habits, or, I don't know what the
How would we set
proper-
a standard for that? 8 people, 6 people? I don't know. I'm not being facetious. We don't have a number here.
I don't know, I'm asking
And-
the applicant to
Yeah.
convince me.
Okay. I'm just trying to.
No, I know.
You know,
I know.
okay.
And I've read these too many times.
And I know you've got 3 screens going, and you're the analyst here.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I believe Ms. Rollins, because she's also staff with Development Services, either through Scott or she had some information to share with the board, so.
Certainly.
We have a community resident website that staff uses to determine the residence that's located within the 1,600 walking distance has 6 bedrooms and 7 residents.
Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Answers that question.
Hmm?
I said, that answers that question. Does
Okay.
anybody else have questions?
Questions, questions, questions? Do you have any more questions for the applicant right now?
I think I'm pretty.
All right, let's move on right now. You can always come back. This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support of the applicant? Okay, I'd like you to come to this podium in the middle. Sir, if you're going to be coming down, anybody coming down, sit in the front row so we can, the commuting time slows our meetings.
Hi. Hi, good evening. My name is Troy Mason. Last name is spelled Mason. I live at 4110 Northeast 15th Avenue, Pompano Beach, Florida, 33064.
Have you been sworn in?
I have.
Please, Mr. Mason.
Thank you. So yes, the residence that I live in now is, I currently live in a recovery residence. And I'm the house manager for that recovery residence as well. And I've been in that position now for a little over 2 years, which is also in the same neighborhood that this house is in as well. It's literally like a couple blocks away, but same neighborhood. I just wanted to reiterate that Lindsay asked me, when she approached me about this a long time ago, she asked if I would be the manager of this recovery residence, and I accepted. So I just wanted to reiterate to the board what I said, a little bit about what I said back in October, that as manager of this recovery residence, there would be rules that will be enforced, that as manager, these guys that will be composing of this recovery community will have to, these rules they will have to follow. There will be drug testing, there will be breathalyzations at least twice a week, and that, it'll be a zero tolerance type of policy. Strict curfews will be enforced and rules will be enforced, just like I have now at my current residence that I manage. And it is very much like a family community. I just also wanted to reiterate for this particular residence, with the concerns about, what with the number of people and in the house. So with this residence, one of the rules will be that the guys, and I'll be living in the house as well, like I'll be the live-in manager. The guys will not be allowed to hang out in front of the residence. They will not be allowed to loiter out in front of the house. That will not be allowed. The back of the house has a brick fenced-in wall around it. So it's basically like a brick privacy fence around the house. So that's like whenever we have our house meetings and stuff, we'll have them like in the house, but whenever they're hanging outside, it'll be in the back. So there won't be any loitering out front of the house, which I'm sure was a general concern there. Also, as far as the concern for cars and things like that, whenever I came down here for treatment myself over 2.5 years ago, and I didn't obtain my first vehicle until I was down here for close to 2 years. So it's very uncommon for someone who's coming into recovery residence to have a vehicle, but like Lindsay was saying, that's something that would be screened and acknowledged. So I just wanted to reiterate to the board that I would be managing the house. I'm aware of the concerns of the, for the community and the neighborhood, and that's something that will not be taken lightly. That is something that I will strongly enforce with the guys. They will not be allowed to, run amok and things like that. Like the recovery house that I live in now, the guys don't even, the neighbors don't even know that we're a sober living home. But we're friends with the neighbors. Like I go and I help the lady across the street from me change her headlight or things like that. I like to foster a recovery environment. I just wanted to reiterate that to the board, all right?
Thank you.
So you'll be leaving that facility and moving to this one?
Yes, ma'am.
Are either of these facilities, are there standards for them to be co-ed or?
Co-ed, the one that I live in now is all male, and the one that they're proposing is going to be all male. I know they have co-ed residences, but that's not the plan for this one. Yeah, the house I live in now, I'm the manager, and I have 5 guys that live in the house with me. It's managed by First Step Behavioral Health.
So as the manager, are you there 24/7? Are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Have a job other than?
Well, no, I'm sorry, I do. Yeah, I do work. I work in IT. I work in networking and IT. So I can work from home, but I'm very flexible, and when I can come back and forth, I work in Fort Lauderdale. I mean, I'm always at home when I'm not at work, and a lot of times I work from home. So yeah, all my time is spent at the house and when I'm at the office, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
At the home you're at now, how many people do you have there?
Okay, there's 6 of us total. I'm the manager, and I've got 5 guys that live in the house. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a much smaller home that I live in now. It's like very, very small. It's like probably 1,100 maybe square foot. So much in this house, it's like 4,601 square foot total. If my memory serves correct, yes.
And one more question. I was going to ask them, but I'll ask you. So if they don't have a car, how do they get to, they walk the street to go to the buses? What?
All right, so yes. So Northeast 15th Avenue, where I live, that's the main cross street for this house that we're talking about now. There are, the bus stops that we go to are right there on Federal. So my guys, where we go now, we just walk right up, I think it's 38th, I think, and we just cut right up to where they're building that Starbucks right now.
Yep.
With the familiar, there's a bus stop right there. So yeah, the guys will walk up there to the bus stop. A couple of them will have scooters, like little electrical ones, and they'll ride up to the bus stop. And yeah, and as far as scooter parking, that's, like it's closed in the back, so the guys won't be leaving their scooters and stuff out front. I'll ensure that the residence maintains a extremely cleanliness up to code.
Any other questions? Thanks for explaining all that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, does anyone else in the audience wish to speak in support? Hearing none. Does anyone wish to speak in opposition? Hearing none. Meredith, correspondence?
Yes, we have in opposition 2 letters from Kathy Gassner and 3 letters from SKIOFFLA 51 and 2 letters of support.
Okay, excellent. I'm not going to read them. We've heard enough testimony. People will be in favor, some will be in opposition. Any additional questions? Closing comments? No closing comments? Board discussion? Motion? Again, the vote here, just we're saying this ahead of time, is a simple majority here, not a supermajority. So, do I have a motion?
Board discussion.
Well, we can have you want board discussion?
So I've requested in the past, I requested again tonight, I've requested numerous times that we get an independent legal opinion comparing and contrasting the Lauber report, our code, and clarifying additional board questions, since we are seeing an increase in the number of these cases coming to us for the trigger always being the distance, the proximity to another similar type facility. And I strongly believe that we need such an opinion. I feel, based on the information that we have available to us, the Lauber report, despite some of the unanswered questions I have and the concerns I have, I feel that a preponderance of the evidence, for lack of a better term, is that we're, the evidence is in support of approval, barring better interpretation and guidance from the city. So as much as I do have concerns with the impact of this facility on the character of the neighborhood, I do feel that based on what information is available to me, the staff report and the submittal package, that we're somewhat obligated to support it at this point, unless council points out something I'm missing.
Counselor, do you want to?
Yeah, unfortunately, because I don't sit in your seats, those are solely yours to be determined, basis and all. I understand your frustration, and staff understands the frustration with our current situation, and there are a lot of others who are concerned about the uptick that seems to require, as you've stated, an automatic approval without any sort of digging below the surface. And there are some rationales for that. The Lauber report did provide sort of a legal analysis, and that causes us to be protected because there are several local jurisdictions throughout the country, local governments, which have succumbed to litigation because of certain choices that seemed rational at the time, but because of the developments that have occurred over the last 20 years or so, things have slightly moved in a different direction. So I've heard you loud and clear. I know Scott has heard you loud and clear. The chairman has already given me the look. So Monday, there will be lots of discussion to move forward to try to engage the outside legal counsel that could review and advise.
And I sincerely appreciate that. You know, again, I've asked for it multiple times. It just feels like in our code, we have options and things to consider, and the Lauber report feels to truncate any of the potential options and essentially points us towards we have to approve. So it's a little challenging.
Understood.
All right. Do we have a motion? Somebody has to make a motion? Motion?
Okay. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm the one that can't see, and for the special, I move in case number 2417000009, special exception. I move that there is competent and substantial evidence in the record that all the requirements for granting this special exception has been met, and that we grant the special exception subject to the conditions required by staff.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion. It's made and seconded. Further discussion? Meredith, please call the roll.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
Penny Cutt,
Yes.
Joe Circusi,
Yes.
Ray Lambunsky,
Yes?
Ada Rogers,
Yes.
Daniel Yaffe.
Yes, good luck. You're approved. We're going to take about a 10-minute break. We're back on the record. Next case is item number 3, special exception for Tom Mason, P&Z. I'm sorry, P&Z 24-17000010. Counselor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Tom Johnston, Johnston, lifelong resident of the city of Pompano Beach, and presently have our offices at 633 East Atlantic Boulevard here in the beautiful city of Pompano Beach. It's my pleasure to represent 2 fine gentlemen here this evening, Mr. Tom Mason, who's the property owner, and this gentleman who has the business on the property, which is the cause of our having to be here for special exception.
Wonderful. And before we go any further, let's hear from Scott Reale.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening again, everyone. The applicant landowner is requesting special exception approval as required by Section 155-4219L1 of the Pompano Beach Zoning Code in order to utilize the subject property, which is zoned B4, for used automobile and light truck sales with outdoor display. This property is located on the west side of northbound South Dixie Highway between Southwest 6th Street and Southwest 8th Street. The subject property was developed in the mid-1970s as a warehouse. I found the original permits 3320 and 3321, consisting of 2 lots in the Raceway Center subdivision. At the time of the development, the property was zoned general industrial, I-1. The property currently holds an active business tax receipt for used automobile and light truck sales with indoor display. That's owned by Lexi's Auto Sales. And while this use is permitted by right in the B4 zoning district, code enforcement issued a citation to the property owner for displaying vehicles outside. That's code case 2309003796. A special exception is required to allow outdoor vehicle display in the B4 zoning district. We have Mr. Mario Sotolongo here as well if you have any questions about that code case. But essentially, the special exception request is to allow the outdoor component for vehicle display. If approved, the applicant must ensure that all vehicles on display are properly maintained and organized. The site must comply with the motor vehicle sales standards outlined in Section 155-4219A2A. And specifically, 1 display pad not exceeding 500 square feet is allowed for every 100 feet of street frontage. Since the site has 100 feet of frontage along South Dixie Highway, 1 display pad is permitted. And also just note that parking spaces used for vehicle display cannot be counted toward meeting the minimum parking requirements. Several motor vehicle sales and service businesses are located along South Dixie Highway, many of which are legally non-conforming. Staff finds the proposed use is compatible with other businesses near the subject property.
Scott, can I stop you for just a second?
Yes, of course.
I want some clarification here. Item number 3, you said here specifically 1 display pad. This was when I was reviewing the notes last week. This popped up, not exceeding, but for every 100 feet of street frontage. This is on, I believe, a corner property. Is it not?
No, it's an internal.
Okay, then I'm a little, I wanted a little clarification. Is it a total 100-foot frontage?
Yes, it's 2 50-foot lots that have been joined together, so 100 feet of frontage.
So we're talking then, they can, if we give them a special exception, we could give it to them for one pad.
1 500 square foot display pad for, and that's where that's the maximum allowed
So
for.
that's, what's that, 2 cars? 10 by 50, 20 by 40, 2 cars, 3 cars maybe?
And that's why I have asked, I'm going to make an additional recommended condition that further shows the display area with the dimensions before they obtain their zoning use certificate and business tax receipt for the outdoor vehicle display. I'd like to know exactly where the vehicles are.
I just needed to understand in my head
Yeah.
what they're asking for.
Yeah. So there are 13 special exception review standards. The applicant has addressed each of these, And should the board determine the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence sufficient to satisfy those review standards, staff requests the board include the following 3 conditions. The first one is a little bit modified from what was in the report. Obtain all necessary governmental permits and approvals, including a zoning use certificate and a business tax receipt for outdoor display of vehicles, and submit a more detailed site plan that clearly delineates the precise location and dimensions of the 500 square foot area designated for outdoor vehicle display in accordance with the motor vehicle sales standards specified in section 155-4219A2A. The second recommended staff condition, vehicles on display must be operable and not visibly wrecked, junked, or dismantled. And the third and final recommended staff condition is loading and unloading of vehicles shall be conducted on-site, and no operation associated with the use shall occur in a manner that impedes the normal free flow of vehicular traffic on South Dixie Highway. And that concludes staff's report, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thanks, Scott. Any questions? Mr. Johnson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have a memo from the fire department, from Pete McGinnis, our fire marshal, and James Galloway, which says the fire department has no objection to this application. And this afternoon at 4:54 p.m., my dear brother Scott, who I appreciate the great job he has to do as a principal planner of the city because it's heavy, okay, sent me another condition, which he just read about the pad, okay? So I got that just before 5 o'clock today, but that's fine. We'll agree to that because that's the law, okay? And he wanted to point it out. I happen to represent the landowner, who I just identified, and the business owner, Mr. Jelinas. Mr. Jelinas is a husband and father and has lived all of his life in Pompano. He matriculated through Pompano schools, and he's a businessman in this community and does a very good job for his clientele. Let me highlight the points because you undoubtedly have my epistle and have diligently read each and every word, I'm sure, and I appreciate it, but let me go over a couple of highlights. This property is zoned B4 now. B4 does allow used cars, so if you're voting tonight, you're not voting on used cars, okay? You're only voting on can they be displayed outdoors. And the code used to allow that, and then it was changed a number of years ago to require a special exception. But the first condition is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? And it certainly is, because the underlying land use is commercial, and therefore commercial allows this use along with the B4. And then we have the districts where we have this particular circumstances of reviewing all the facts together with the property owner requesting the special exception as B4 district, and I go on to talk about the overhead photographs that I supplied with the application. Hopefully you received those. And the fact that the neighbors are semi-industrial. Pinecrest is a very fine school, but it has its bus facility right next door to this property, okay, on the north side. And they have about 60 buses there. Plus, besides these heavy, intense industrial use buses, they have their repair facility there. So that's our neighbor on the north. And to ask for a special exception, part of our burden is to show that we do not detract from the community. So I don't know how this nice used car facility is going to detract for the community when the surrounding uses are basically industrial, okay? Next. Does it comply with all the specific use standards? And we say in here it does. We searched the code and we certify that it complies with all the use standards. The application was originally filed by Mr. Jelinas for outdoor storage. This is not outdoor storage. And I went over that with Mr. Reale, and we both agree that this is not outdoor storage. This is display under the particular ability to do that in a B4 for used cars. We're not overburdening the capacity of any public facility, including streets or other transportation facilities, potable water, schools, sewer, all those other conditions. This is an appropriate location. You have to keep in mind that we have to have used car facilities because not everybody has the pocketbook in our society to buy a brand new car. And in fact, we've come through with the COVID situation, with the situation with the automobile industry, where people were priced out of automobiles. And a nice, clean, used car lot that has nice, dependable transportation is a must-do for a community to be able to service all of its low-income and moderate-income citizens. And so this provides a particularly nice fit on this site. It does not, because they don't do work there, it does not add to adverse noise, glare, vibrations, or any of those things that are required by the code. It adequately screens. I go in to say that we have Pinecrest on the north, and then there's walls around the property. The only face of the property is onto Dixie Highway, where the cars will be displayed in front of a building there. It doesn't have any significant deterioration effect on water or air resources or scenic views. We're charged with maintaining safe and convenient ingress and egress, and with the plan that we're going to provide with Mr. Reale, we've agreed to do that as one of the conditions. We'll show the driveways in and out off of Dixie. The nice thing about this part of Dixie Highway, though, is it used to be 3 lanes. And the city just spent several millions of dollars within the last 12 months removing one of the lanes and adding parking and medians and trees and bushes and shrubs and irrigation system. And it really cleaned up this area of Dixie Highway and makes it look presentable for the first time in my lifetime, okay? It looks decent, and that's right in front of this property. So it's going to be an enhancement to the businesses along this street. We don't affect or have an adverse impact on any of the neighbors' properties or their development. This, as I just mentioned, fulfills and demonstrates a need for public convenience and service to the population by providing these automobiles. It complies with all other relevant city, state, and federal laws. My client has got a state of Florida used car license here. He's got a BTR from the city to have this facility, the current one, and he will be amending that if this is approved to take it from just having used cars there to having used cars with outdoor display. I have entered an appearance in the code compliance case, and I appeared here last week. They gave us a 60-day continuance, so my client won't incur any fines should this board decide to grant our application this evening. But my client has all of the necessary business licenses provided for under the laws of the state of Florida, both state and local licenses. I go on to talk about the proximity to other businesses in the community, and we just have, we're a better fit than all our neighbors. All our neighbors are quasi-industrial, okay? So this is a lot more, less intense and more benign use. So we thank the board for its consideration. I have the landowner here. I have the business owner here, should you have any questions, and we would greatly appreciate the approval of this application, and we thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support? Hearing none. Anyone in opposition? Again, hearing none. Meredith, correspondence?
No correspondence.
Thank you. No correspondence, no questions? Closing comments?
Questions?
I'm sorry, we do have a question.
In light of the hour,
What's that?
in light of the hour, there are no further comments.
No, I'm sorry, Penny, you had a question?
Scott, you said the property is zoned for indoor storage of used vehicles?
Correct. That's permitted by right. To allow vehicles on display outside, that requires the special exception. It didn't used to be that way, as Mr. Johnston.
And what is the theory behind that?
I think it was to limit, I mean, maybe
To
I'm
avoid
being
junkyards.
offended. Yeah, there is a certain element of some used car dealerships
Yeah.
have that. And
Junkyards.
so they wanted to, not this one, of course. It's so that's why I think the code was changed to try to, require an additional level of review before we just say, okay,
And
display
I know
whatever.
we've had these types of cases before us before.
Mm-hmm.
What conditions differentiate a junkyard from a nice used car dealership?
Oh, well, the junkyard's a completely different use. That requires,
I-1X.
yeah.
Well, not a junkyard, but a used car.
Chop shop, those types
Yeah.
of things. Yeah, those.
I mean, there's a line at some point between a used car dealership and,
Yes, there is. And this use as a used car dealer with outdoor display is subject to those standards that all motor vehicle sales and service uses are required to. And the biggest one being, where's your display area and where is your parking for people who are going to the site. So applicant is able to meet those standards. We're going to see that in the site plan before we give the final zoning use approval, but there are standards that need to be followed, and if they're not, then they'll be cited by code.
thank you.
Good? Closing comments, council?
No, sir, thank you, sir.
All right, public hearing is now closed. Board discussion or motion? Penny, you'll make the motion.
It's your turn. You can see, I can't.
You guys have the motion script?
Yeah, they do. Everybody does.
Okay. Feel free to, you want, yeah, go ahead. Please.
Okay. Case number 24-17-00-0010. I move to find that there is competent and substantial evidence in the record that all of the requirements for granting the special exception have been met, and that we grant the special exception subject to the conditions requested by staff.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion. It's been made and seconded. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Joe Circusi,
Yes.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
Penny Cutt,
Yes.
Ray Lebomsky,
Yes?
Ada Rogers,
Yes.
Daniel Yaffe.
Yes, you're approved.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Happy holidays and
Thank you, you too.
healthy and prosperous 2025.
Thank you.
You guys.
All right. We'll let this crowd filter out, and I'm going to call the last hearing of the night, item number 4, a variance by Jason Ortiz, P&Z 24-11-000012. Do I say counselor?
I'm not a counselor.
You got a suit, you got the tie and the suit.
I just respect for the occasion. My name
We
is Israel.
got to approve this guy right away. He's the first person that's respected us.
I wish I could speak like the other guy.
Please tell us who you are and why you're here.
My name is Israel Kushner. I'm a property manager for the owner, whose name is Jason Ortiz. My last name is Kushner, Kushnir.
Your address, please.
My address is 1980 South Ocean Drive, Hallandale Beach, Suite 8Q. And
Have you been sworn in?
I have been, yes.
Excellent. Hold off, and we'll hear from Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening again. The applicant is requesting a variance from section 155-4303A3C of the Pompano Beach zoning code, which requires an operative interconnecting door between an attached accessory dwelling unit, we call that an ADU, and a principal dwelling. The applicant seeks approval to allow an attached ADU without this interconnecting door. The property is located on the west side of Northeast 23rd Terrace, between Northeast 8th Street and Northeast 9th Street, in the Beachway Estates subdivision. The subject property was originally developed in the 1950s. In 1986, a certificate of occupancy was issued for an addition to the single-family dwelling under permit 863687. The approved plans included the construction of a new second floor over part of the existing structure and explicitly stated that the property was designed for single-family use only. Under the current zoning code, a property with a single-family dwelling is permitted to have one accessory dwelling unit, provided the requirements outlined in Section 155-4303A3 are met. And again, one such requirement is that an ADU that is attached to the principal dwelling must include an operable interconnecting door. The applicant proposes to convert the second floor addition into an accessory dwelling unit. However, the associated building permit, 24-8431, was rejected by the zoning department because the plans do not include an interconnecting door. The applicant argues that installing an interconnecting door is impractical and awkward due to the design of the house, with the proposed ADU located above the principal dwelling. It is likely that the design typology where the ADU is placed on a separate floor from the main dwelling was not considered when this code provision was written. And pardon me, I lost my thought. And so they are impractical and awkward due to the design of the house. It is likely the design typology where the ADU is placed on a second floor was not considered when this code was written, as most ADUs are either detached, when you obviously don't have to have an interconnecting door if it's detached, or is located on the same floor as the principal dwelling, which is very typical. The proposed ADU is accessed by an exterior staircase along the side of the house, which complies with the ADU standards. There is a picture of the house in my staff report. You can clearly see that the proposed accessory dwelling unit is on the second floor. The only portion of the second floor would be this proposed ADU. So there's really no way to do an interconnecting door aside from a spiral staircase or something connecting it. So given the unique design of the property, staff does not object to waiving the requirement for an interconnecting door between the principal dwelling and the accessory dwelling unit. The property currently has one open code enforcement case for a short-term rental violation, and that's case 24-09006587. Again, Mario Sotolongo, from Director of Code Compliance, is here and can speak to that if you have any questions. There are 8 variance review standards. The applicant has substantial evidence sufficient to satisfy those variance review standards. Staff recommends the board include the following 2 conditions as part of the order. 1, obtain all necessary governmental permits and approvals, including building and zoning compliance permits. And the second recommended condition, address and resolve all outstanding violations associated with Code Enforcement Case 24-09006587 to the satisfaction of the Code Compliance Department and Special Magistrate prior to the issuance of a short-term rental permit. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you, Scott. So this is an existing unit on top of another building, and it has a outside staircase?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
that's all. Okay, thank you. All yours.
Thank you. I understand that the issue here is that the entrance to the ADU is on the exterior and it needs to be on the interior. But as Mr. Riley advised, the property was actually, the addition was built before this rule was made. So I don't know how. There you go. So if the property owner was to install a staircase between the second floor and the first floor, it's just going to, there is nowhere to put it, and it's also not cost effective, and the entrance from the second floor, it doesn't bother anybody or anything. It's existing, and there was no. It's like I said, it's not cost effective, and also there is no place to put it that wouldn't interfere with the downstairs. So the purchaser, the owner of the property, Mr. Ortiz, is a veteran. He bought this property as a tax exchange. He didn't do any renovations to it. He bought it the way it was, and he did not expect any of this to occur. Since the day he bought it, he applied for a short-term license with the city of Pompano Beach. And because of this violation, he cannot conclude and get his license until this violation is closed, which is the ADU violation, which is there is no interior connection between the second floor and the first floor. The fire department has no objection to it. They looked at it, and thank you.
Thank you. This public hearing, I'm sorry, does the board have any questions? I know we've all looked over the material and given it a lot of thought. This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support? Hearing none. In opposition? Hearing none. Correspondence?
We received one letter of opposition and one letter of opposition to an interconnecting door. So, Scott, if you can.
Yeah, so the letter that Meredith is referring to, the person who wrote the letter objected to having an interconnecting door. So it's really not an objection.
Negative, and it's they're approving it?
Basically, they thought that, I believe they were confused about the request, and they said, oh, no, we don't want an interconnecting door. And I'm like, well, that's exactly what they're asking for an exemption from, to not have that. So I really don't want to call it a letter of objection, because I think that they misunderstood they don't want an interconnecting door.
Okay. All right. Then, no other questions? Closing.
I do.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please speak up.
No, I apologize. So I'm just trying to, I want to make sure I vote correctly, but, so
We do too.
the question is as that they don't want to, they're not putting another staircase in there. They're just going to leave the one that's outside and then just leave the house the way it is.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And the other thing is the violation. Do we need to worry about any of that? No. Okay.
That needs to be cleaned up before they'll get the short-term rental, yeah.
Any other questions from anybody? Not once, twice. Okay. Closing comments, sir.
Nope. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Public hearing is now closed. Board discussion or a motion?
I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
In planning and zoning case 24-11000012, I move that we find there's competent and substantial evidence in the record that all the requirements for granting the variance have been met, and that we grant the variance subject to the two conditions requested by staff.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Call the question, please.
Penny Cutt,
Yes.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
Joe Circusi,
Yes.
Ray Lombomsky,
Yes.
Ada Rogers,
Yes.
Daniel Yaffe.
Yes, you're approved. All right, folks, this is the last meeting of the year. Want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy New Year, and I hope I'm not missing anything, and especially to Meredith, to Scott, to James. You guys have been terrific. Made this, a whole lot easier. So thank you all.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mario.
Thank you.
And Mario, I'm
And
sorry, I
Mario.
didn't see you down there, sir.
Meeting, but he
And our
hides it.
TV,
And also, you did a great job using your left hand, by the way.
and our TV people, our cameramen.
Our camera people in the back.
Yes. All right, we're done.